Websites are obviously a very visual medium, and so we're going to dedicate an entire reading and video here to talking about optimizing images. There's a full reading of this on the IMS322 documentation site. A lot of the content we're going to talk about in this video is also here. Make sure you review this reading if you haven't already. And also, obviously follow along with the content of this video. So starting off, recommended image sources. Where do you get your images from? How do you source good quality images? These are 4 recommendations. You don't have to get your images from here when you use them in different projects, but these are the ones that I think are going to be the easiest to find good stuff and the best outcomes. So Lorem Pixum is one that I actually found fairly recently. And if you remember, you saw me in previous videos when I would put in some placeholder text, I would type the word Lorem 20 or Lorem 30, some number after the word Lorem, and hit tab, and it would autofill a bunch of placeholder text. And Lorem Pixum is kind of the same idea, except it's placeholder images. How do you, if you just need an image somewhere, you need to see what your layout looks like with images. You want to try out a specific grid layout. And it doesn't matter what those images are, you just need images quickly. That's what Lorem Pixum is for. How do you use this? You're going to grab one of these URLs and you can customize the images slightly. They are going to be random images, but you can customize the type of image in terms of the compression used, whether it's JPEG or WebP compression, and you can also customize the resolution. So I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom of the Lorem Pixum site to show you. This is going to be our starting point here. I've got the address pixum.photos/200/300.webp. So this is going to give me a random image that's 200 pixels wide, 300 pixels tall in the WebP image format. Let me open a code pen, just like a scratch code pen here. And we'll create an image tag. And the source attribute, if you've used like VS Code in the past, this source attribute was probably a file in the same folder as your HTML. Here, it's going to be this address. I'm just going to copy this and paste it in here to the source. And I should get a random image. Oops, there we go. Okay, so I have a random image. Again, it's 200 wide, 300 tall. I can adjust these dimensions here. Let's do like a 16 by 9 image. So 1600 by 900, there's a very wide aspect ratio image. Oh, it's massive too, right? We'll talk more about that in a second. So dealing with size is something that we need to think about. Let me go back. Let me go down to 800 by 450 here, so you have something a little bit more manageable for now. Okay. So again, this aspect ratio of this is, I just halved those two numbers from before, 1600 by 900. So the aspect ratio is still 16 wide by 9 tall. For every 16 pixels wide, there are 9 pixels in height. Common aspect ratios, 4 by 3, 3 by 2. Obviously 16 by 9. These are aspect ratios that come out of cameras, and they're often, aspect ratios that photo editors will use when they're cropping their photos. They want to maintain that specific look. They don't always crop to these common aspect ratios, but it's very common for them to do so. If I want to customize this further, let me make this a little bit smaller again. I'm going to go in half again. Let's say 400 by 225. And I'm just going to put another image tag right below that with the exact same URL. Now it is the same photo, but it's not because I used the same link. It's a random photo, but it's just making one request to Lorem Pixum for a photo that's this size. If I want them to actually be different photos, all I have to do is add $random and then a number to the end of my address there. So if I say, this goes before WebP, before the .webp. So .webp is what requests an image in the WebP format, in that compression format. question mark random equals 1 is going to go before .webp, question mark random 2 before my second one. So this will guarantee that I get 2 unique images. If I made them both random 1, I think they'll be the same again in this case. Yeah, so it's just doing like it did before when I didn't add random at all. It's getting the same photo. So I want to use different numbers here. There are a couple assignments where this is how you're going to get images. Anytime you do something in CodePen, this is probably the best source for your image because it's going to, you can't actually upload files to CodePen. You can't upload your own files to CodePen, and you can specify exactly what you want, the resolution and the compression. Now, how is this different from going to just Google Images? Well, to be completely honest, there's a lot of times I've seen people go to Google Images, and I don't know why I searched for Google Images, sorry. There's a lot of times where I've seen people go to Google Images and they'll look for a photo, and they don't necessarily have a lot of control here over what's the aspect ratio of the images I'm finding, what's the quality of the images I'm finding. You can do some filtering there. If you go to this tools link here, I can choose size and stuff like that. But what I'll see a lot of times is just not great quality photos in people's projects because they were looking here and they maybe didn't know a lot of details about the photos that they were finding. So I'm not saying you can't use Google Images for sourcing photos like this. I'm just letting you know that if you do that, you have to be really careful about getting images that meet the requirements of our projects. You can do that a little bit more deliberately with Lorem Pixum. Even though they're random, you can be deliberate about the resolution and the codec. I'm sorry, the compression. Codec is an audio term for compression. Another source, Unsplash. You maybe have used Unsplash before. Now you can't put Unsplash photos in CodePen projects because you can't upload files. But let's look at what would that process look like. Unsplash.com. You don't need an account. You just have free stock photos from Unsplash. Some of them do require an account. That's what this Unsplash Plus means. But let me just grab this photo here. I would recommend, you're never going to need a photo that is wider than 2200 pixels. So this large size is still plenty big. I'm going to download that version. Okay, so one issue here. It's got a really long file name. It's good because it identifies the photographer, but I don't want that to be something that I'm using in my project necessarily. It's going to make it harder to use in my project. So let me go to my code spaces. I have that responsive image gallery test project that I started earlier. Open in code spaces. And I'm going to put this photo in this project. So the process is a little bit different, but in some ways this is probably more similar to how you are used to doing it, because we are going to upload the file. We're going to make it part of the same folder as the rest of our website's project files. While I'm waiting for my code space to load, I'm going to actually come down here and rename this photo because I don't like, there we go. Okay, so what was this photo? It was kind of a weird, we'll just call it lights. Okay, so it's a lot easier to deal with because it has a much shorter name. And once this is loaded over here, all I have to do is drag and drop this file into the code spaces file explorer in order to upload it. Okay, so that's taking longer than I expected. So while that's getting ready, let's talk about a couple of other options for photos. We could do the same upload process with the other photos we do as well. So artificial intelligence photos. There's not a ton of great sources for high quality images using AI that are free. You can do paid services like, it's completely, oh man, I'm forgetting what they're called now. I know that like the same ChatGPT folks have, people that make ChatGPT also have an AI image generator, and I'm completely blanking what it's called. Anyway, my recommendation, you don't have to use my recommendation, but my recommendation is to use Adobe Firefly. If you have a Adobe Creative Cloud account, you can generate, it's not unlimited, but you can generate a lot of images with Adobe Firefly. Even if you don't have Creative Cloud, you can generate, I think it's 25 per month for free. Oh shoot, I'm not signed in. I don't have my password saved, so let me do this from Safari. All right, so the cool thing about Adobe Firefly, aside from the fact that it's AI images, you don't get unlimited ones, but the ones that you do get are high quality. So let's see what we can do here. Yes, thank you. Oh. Okay. So it's, no thanks, not now. It's very similar to what you would do with something like ChatGPT. You give it some sort of text prompt, and it's going to generate an image for you. And I believe, again, the free, oh, why didn't it bring me to Firefly? The free quota, that's not the right word, but the free limit is 25 per month. Okay, so let's generate an image. Oh, how about banana on a white background? So each generation uses up one of your 25 credits. And I can customize this a bit on the right-hand side. I can customize the aspect ratio. Let's go with 4:3. Yeah, see, I have to regenerate this now. And I'll keep just those two things, 4:3 and photo style. Generate. It'll take a moment to generate some new images. So I can keep an eye on how many credits I've used. I've used 21 out of my 25 so far, but hey, yeah, these look kind of realistic. Kind of looks like if you had described banana to someone who hadn't seen one before, maybe, but maybe this is the best of the bunch. So this is actually like a decent quality photo. If I download it, I can open it I'll just open it in my Mac preview app so I can see how big is this photo. It is 2300 pixels wide by 2304 wide by 1792 tall in height. So it's a good quality photo. This is perfectly acceptable quality to use for all of my projects. And again, it looks decent enough. At least it's high quality, even though it's a little bit strange looking. Plus, I've got that watermark down at the bottom. That's completely fine for our projects. I just want to make sure that we're starting with high quality images to begin with. So let me rename this photo as well as banana. There we go. And is my code space ready? It's not. Something is strange here. Let me try refreshing and see if it... There we go. Okay, so I'm going to make a folder here called images. I just clicked this little folder plus icon, images, and both of my banana and lights photos are, oh, went too far. I'm going to drag them right into this images folder. Great. Okay, so now in my HTML, I'm going to create an image tag, and the source is going to be images/banana.jpg, and let's make a second one, images/lights.jpg. Remember to see your preview. You can click on the Go Live button in the bottom. If you want to spend some time arranging your windows when you're in CodeSpace, it's not a bad idea. So we have a bit of an issue here, which we're going to talk about in a second, but the issue is obviously that these photos are massive. Okay, so I'm going to keep this open so that we can come back to this and make some adjustments. I've got my two projects open here. The last recommended image source, of course, is just to use your own. If you are, you've got a great quality camera on you, I'm assuming that you have a smartphone. Those cameras are wonderful. If you can find something that you can take a photo of fairly decent quality, you don't have to be the best photographer, but it'll probably be better than some super compressed low resolution image that you find online. All right, so next thing to talk about here is resolution and compression. First thing that I want to do is think about how I'm using my photos in my actual layout. Let's go to my giant banana and giant lights photo. I'm going to put these two side by side. There's no reason to be using full-size resolution photos, uploading those, they're going to take up the file size is much larger than it needs to be. So I'm going to optimize the resolution and the compression format for these images. Two things to think about here. I've given you some guidelines in image resolution and compression on the reading. Think about how much of the layout this photo is going to take up. My recommendation, and you can play with this a little bit. It's okay if it's not exact. Sometimes you just have to change these numbers slightly to accommodate easier math for the aspect ratio of your photo. But my recommendation is, if you have a 2-column layout, or like 2 photos next to each other that are taking up the body, spanning the full size of the body, but each one is half of the body, each photo should have a width of 1100 pixels. There's no reason for it to be any larger than that. So what I want to do is take these 2 photos, and I'm going to use a utility called Squoosh. Yes, that's actually what it's called. It's a free online cropping and resizing and compression site for photos. So I'm going to put my banana photo in here. And I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to resize it. Again, I want my maximum size to be 1100. I want to maintain the aspect ratio. If I uncheck that, actually, let me go back to, yeah. So if I were to uncheck that and I were to change the width, it's going to start to, well, actually it didn't, did it? That's weird. It maintained the aspect ratio, even though I am not maintaining it in my numbers here. Okay, so you do want to maintain the aspect ratio. Oh, it's because, I'm sorry, it's because it's stretching. There we go. So it's automatically stretching the image to maintain that aspect ratio, and I don't want that to happen. Let me see if I can get my original back here. I think I have to just re-upload my photo. Let's start over. That'll be easier. All right, so resizing. Yes, maintain aspect ratio. I don't want the image to be stretched. I don't want it to be squished. I don't want it to be lower resolution in width than it was in the ratio of the width and height. I don't want one to be lower than the other. I want to maintain whatever 2304 divided by 1792 or whatever. I want it to maintain the ratio between those 2 numbers. So there we go. It did that math for me. That's the nice thing. So I'm shrinking, or I'm reducing the resolution, and I was just using the zoom button down here, by the way, to zoom out a bit so I could see the whole photo. I'm going to change the compression to WebP. It's going to make a much smaller file size. And if you may have noticed yourself, if you've downloaded photos from the internet, that there's a lot of them in this WebP format. Look at the difference in the size between original image, 2.28 megabytes, and WebP, 32.7 kilobytes. That's a massive file size change. And quality, here's our compressed version. If I move the slider to the right, there's our original version. It looks about the same, doesn't it? Right? Like, yeah, there's a slight difference in quality, but it's pretty hard to see that. Plus, it's probably going to be even smaller in our actual layout. So that's a massive savings in file size, which means your website's going to load a ton faster. So let me download this new version, banana.webp. And for posterity, let's get my second photo here, lights.jpg. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to resize it to a width of 1100, and I'm going to compress it as WebP down to 11.5 kilobytes. These are tiny file sizes now, and they still look really good, right? I think so. All right, so what I want to do with these new photos is replace, let me delete the ones I uploaded earlier. They're too big, both in resolution and file size. And I'm going to now upload lights.webp and banana.webp instead. Now, since they have .webp at the end, that means I also need to change the original, my source attribute was .jpg before. Okay, so this is going to make our site a little bit better. Where did my preview? I must have accidentally closed my preview window here. If you ever lose your preview window, just stop the Go Live server and just restart it. It'll reopen that tab for you. All right, so they're still a little bit larger than they need to be. So now let's talk a little bit about the next part here, which is fluid images. I mentioned that I wanted these two images to be side by side, to be next to each other, and they're too big to do that. So one of the reasons is, well, what size is this displaying at? It's displaying at its original resolution of 1100. If you don't specify an image size, it's going to automatically be 11. It's going to automatically be its original resolution. So I want to specify in my CSS. Let me get rid of my notifications here. I'm going to specify my recommendation for images is that you specify a width of, I'm sorry, not a width, a max width of 100%, and then a height of auto. Why am I not specifying an actual percentage or pixel value for height? Well, because it's probably going to distort my aspect ratio. It's probably going to stretch or squish those photos if I did that. I'd have to be very exact and have exactly the right numbers in there to prevent that from happening. Let's see what this looks like. It's probably going to look about the same. Yeah, it still looks the same. Now, what is it 100% of? It's 100% of its container, which is the body. But the photo is only 11. Our body is wider than 1100 pixels. So it can't fill the entire body. It's just basically, it's going to try to fill the entire body. It's going to try to fill 100% of its container. But it's not able to do that all the way just yet. Okay. However, what's really great about using a percentage is that now this image is fluid, which is the next part. Look at this. Once I make the window smaller, it shrinks with the window. That would not have happened before. Let me remove that style. I'm going to remove my max width and 100% and go back to my preview. Now when I make the window small, it's cutting off that image. So that's a really important part of making, that's a really important part of making responsive images, making them fluid, is setting the max width to 100% or some percentage, so it'll grow and expand with the size of the window here. Now, my suggestion, let me go back to what I had before, which was, there we go. Okay, so we're back to 100%. It is fluid, which is great. With images, my suggestion is to always use max width 100% and height auto. And so, well, what if you wanted your image? What if I wanted this image to only be half the size of the body? Well, I could do that by saying max width 50%. Now, if I go back, it's half the size of the body. But that is actually, that can cause problems once we start to get into more complicated layouts. So we're going to talk about Flexbox pretty soon. But before we get to that, my recommendation is just always use, as sort of a default, there may be edge cases where this doesn't work, but as a default, set max width to 100%, height to auto. This is what that will look like on its own. And then from there, my suggestion is to always use image containers. Always have an element around the image. Even if you only have a single image, put in a div or maybe a figure element. You can read more about the difference between the two of those on the Optimizing Images article in our reading. But if I put this in a div, what that means is the image will always fill its parent, which is the div. It'll always be 100% of that element. Let me save so it formats. Got my nice indentation there. Great. So I have a div that has inside of an image another div that has inside of it another image. So far, nothing is going to look different. It looks exactly like it did before. It still changes width like it did before. If I want to change the size of the image, instead of changing the actual image itself, instead of changing the styling of this image element, I'm going to change the style of those divs around it. So again, let's try changing them to 50%. I'm going to give them a class called image container. And put that on the second div here as well. Great. And so in my CSS, I'm going to create a selector for image container and make that width 50%. Okay, so the end result here is that it seems like it's the same as it was before when I made image width 50%, right? It behaves the same. But again, this is going to make life a lot easier when you start using flex boxes and other more complicated layouts. So just get in the habit of always putting an image inside of some sort of element, usually a div, sometimes a figure. And if you want to change the size of that image, don't change the size of the image itself. Don't style the image, style the container that it's in. It can be a percentage, it could be a fixed value. Doesn't matter what you set it to, it will work. Now I have 500 pixel wide images because, again, I'm changing the size of the container, not of the actual image. The reasoning for this will make a little bit more sense when we look at flex boxes, which is in a future video. That is all for this one.